for the rest of the term. And she wins big. And then later on, she becomes the woman's chairman for Alvin Barkley in the Senate campaign. So, and then Lois goes on. She has she leaves Graves County, goes back to Barron County after she serves, and then she ends up in the Carolinas with her daughter, and she teaches school. She stays active in church work, and she retires as a teacher. And she told her grandson, who talked to me about this book, her grandson, interestingly, is a geoarchaeologist at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina. Very bright young man. And he told me, he said, grandmother always said, she didn't die until 1970. He said, my grandmother always said that politics was just no place for a woman. She had a terrific life. She was a wonderful woman. She was a trailblazer in every sense of the word. In a way, in writing this book, seeing this strong woman in 1922 and what she could do reminded me, I grew up in a home of strong women. And I knew how very capable that women were as capable as men, and I knew that when I was a kid that there were often businesses that were run in Mayfield that were really run by women, but the men, they were at the front. But Lois Roach was a very powerful woman. And it's amazing to me, and one of the rewards of writing the book was to see that, big towns like to look down their nose at smaller places. We're redneck, we're conservative, whatever. But Mayfield, Kentucky, would appoint a woman as sheriff in 1922. It's remarkable that it didn't happen. The other thing that I think I found remarkable about the book was being a lawyer and having tried several cases, some in the courtroom where Sam Galloway was later tried, by the way. The justice system was remarkably good. It was just remarkably good. The lawyers were good. The lawyers were educated. They didn't just read the law. The lawyer that represents Sam Galloway went to St. Louis University. The doctor who came was trained in New York City. The other lawyer was also a university law school trained lawyer. They were good. They were as competent as the lawyers today, just as smart, maybe smarter. I think in a way better trial lawyers because they had to think on their feet. Today we prepare a case before we ever get there. A lot of theirs cases, they didn't know much about what the other side had, and there was a lot of guessing that went on, and they had to be good on their feet, and you really see that, and they tried it faster than we do. This case became very interesting. Same thing happens that always happens. Everybody wanted to try the case immediately. The newspaper was putting the pressure on, said, let's have a trial right now, let's have a trial right now. Well, the defense wants to put it off as long as they can, and they fight about it. They decide that they first of all start selecting a jury, and they end up selecting a jury from another county. Politics is filling this thing because they want to be careful, because you had a strong sheriff's race here. And Galloway, of course, wants people who don't like Roach, and vice versa. So they end up going to another county, and you have another jury altogether. So I won't go into the trial. I'll let you read the book to do it, but I do want to read you. Let me say this. The first trial, there was a hung jury. The second trial, a juror was sick. And after the jury was seated, the second trial, a juror dies of appendicitis. A ruptured appendix, no penicillin, in 1922. He died. The third trial, there is a result there. And I'd like to end this by, there's two things I want to tell you. I want to tell you one more thing that happened. And part of the reason I enjoyed writing the book. I've taught Sunday school for 40 years. And I loved it, and it's just a part of my life. And I really enjoyed writing about the funeral. And I suppose you read that. And that was coming from the heart, because actually those are my words. It's not the preacher's words. I don't know what the preacher said. I just preached that sermon for him because I wanted to do it. But the other part is a fascinating story. John Roach, the Roach family was a pretty bright, capable family. And John's brother was a preacher, Reverend E.R. Roach, and he actually had a church in Paducah. It's called the Third Methodist Church in Paducah. And after his brother was killed, the day after, or I believe it was 2 days after, sobbing and crying. And then Roach walks out, and he turns to whomever is beside him, and he said, "I have no malice toward the man who killed my brother." Very interesting. And then I talk about forgiveness. And that's one of the things I enjoyed thinking about here. I said, you know, we talk about forgiveness all the time. We talk about forgiving people who wrong us. It's hard to do. And doggone it, it's impossible to do. But what I said was that was interesting to me is sometimes with time, forgiveness just happens. It just happens. It's like saying time heals, forgiveness just happens. And it really did in this case. In this case, after all this is over, all these years, there was never any problem between these families. They were good families. Both families are good families. There were never any problems. They go on with their life, and they do a wonderful job. Now I want to read you just a short bit from a trial at the very last. And it's a story of what happens. Of what happens when the jury goes out and gives their verdict. After a night's sleep, the jury reconvened on Friday morning, August 4th. They remained in session for an hour that morning. Suddenly, while Sam Galloway anxiously awaited the decision that would affect the rest of his life on earth, all present in the courtroom heard a firm knock on the jury door. The lawyers looked at each other and at the judge, who was relaxing in his chair. Their hearts beat faster. It always happened that way when the jury was about to come in. The unknown overwhelms. So much is at stake. The foreman of the jury then whispered something in the ear of the deputy sheriff. The deputy walked to the judge's bench and whispered to the judge what the foreman of the jury had told him. The judge made sure that the defendant, the clerk, the court stenographer, and the attorneys were all present. He then announced to the courtroom that the jury was ready to report. He gave the spectators time to again take their seats and requested that the room be silent. He told the full courtroom that under no circumstances would the court tolerate any outburst after the verdict was announced. Order was an absolute necessity. The defendant and his attorney stood, and the Commonwealth attorney and Mrs. Roach stood. The judge ordered the deputy to bring the jury before him. The silence was deafening, and Sam Galloway's heart was pounding. Lois Roach solemnly looked at the 12 as they filed toward their seats in the jury box. The jury foreman had a folded paper in his hand. Both Lois Roach and Sam Galloway now knew that a decision was imminent and inevitable. With all 12 men of the jury standing and facing him, Judge Hester asked them if they had reached a verdict. The foreman said, "We have, Your Honor." Judge Hester then asked him to approach the bench and handed him the verdict. The judge silently read the folded paper handed to him by the foreman. Those in the courtroom hoped to glean the results from the judge's demeanor were disappointed. His face remained solemn. He again admonished all present that he would condone no outpouring of emotion, demonstrations, unnecessary comments, or noise after the verdict was read. He then looked up and he began to read in a deliberate fashion. Sam Galloway, his attorneys, his family, and Lois Roach and her family hung on each word, and their thoughts changed and jumped as each word was spoken. We, the jury, and I'll leave it right there.